All right, welcome back for another CBSI Hot 10 show. Make sure you go over to comicbookinvest.com and check out the article where I may put a few extra tidbits and details that I don't cover here on the show tonight. And while you're at it, check out all the content we do have here on the channel. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, you hit the alert button so you don't miss anything. Keep telling your friends so we can keep growing the channel. And if you want to see this week's list, don't worry, I got you covered. I'll be right back after this short break.
Notable sales.
All right, our first notable sale is a book we've looked at before, but every time this thing comes up, I am surprised as it does not come up all that often. More surprising this week is that this copy that sold was raw, not even graded. This is Wonder Woman 28, the 1 in 25 J.G. Jones variant, the steampunk variant from back in the New 52 days. This is a very popular variant from back in the day, one that does very well on the market, as you'll see here by some of these prices, but a raw one actually sold this week on a best offer. They were asking $2K. They accepted $800 raw, which is still a big number for this book when you consider 9/8 do sell for $2,400. And that last sale was back in December. So it was only 6 months ago, which isn't that far back when you consider the possibilities. Now, I don't know what the grade of that raw copy might end up being, but it's worth a gamble if you think about it. All that said, it's still a big book. It's still a tough book and one that stands out every time I see it sell. Now, the next bit isn't actually a sale. This is something I want to cover here because I wanted to bring it up because I find it kind of interesting. These are actually all pre-sales because this was released this week through Fandango, where you can order a special copy of Superman Unlimited #1. You get a limited print, you get a hat, you get a ticket for the movie, along with this apparently individually numbered up to 1,000, limited to 1,000 copy of Superman Unlimited featuring this photo cover. Again, you had to order through Fandango's website. They apparently sold out after a day or so. So these things started now to pre-sale already on the aftermarket, despite the fact that I don't think anybody has one of these in hand yet. Because again, these were just sold this week through Fandango. You know, the shipping has to happen. But with that said, this Fandango promo, it had a buy-in of $59 when it came out. And again, that $59 got you a print, it got you a hat, it got you this comic, and it got you a ticket to the movie. The comic alone this week, though, with a few pre-sales, probably about half a dozen or so, were already selling from $130 to $180 for this variant. It reminds me of the Dog Biscuit book. It does. It's just a weird tie-in, a strange tie-in, something you just don't see all that often and could be tough. And the individually hand numbering or whatever individually numbered books will make this thing interesting down the line. I will be curious to see how this does once copies hit people's hands and see how well this is shipped. Are any of these going to be 9.8 candidates? Because those Dog Biscuit books were just shipped in a box with a box of Dog Biscuits. No bag, no board, nothing. We'll see how Fandango handles it and how well these books come out. With that all said, those are our notable sales for the week. And before we get to the Hot 10, I want to remind you that you can get 10% off your BCW order by using my code RENA10. So go over to BCW, get your bags, your boards, your long boxes, short boxes, CGC boxes, top loaders, pages for your cards, basically whatever you need to keep your comics or collectibles safe. You can get something over at BCW, and if you're going to order it, save 10% by using my code RENA10. You help out the channel, you save yourself some money, you really got nothing to lose there by doing so. And with that all said, now we have the Hot 10, so let's take a look at our first book.
Number 10.
And our first book is from last week, dropping down a number of spots. I believe this was what, number 2 or 3 last week, and now it's all the way down to number 10. But this is Daredevil 150, the first appearance of Paladin. Again, we're expecting to see this character portrayed in the Vision Quest TV show, Disney Plus show, whatever it may be. And even though it's dropped quite a few spots, it actually did see an increase in most things. Volume's down a tiny bit, still about a couple dozen sales, which is pretty on par with last week, considering the week before there was like nothing. But the prices have gone up a little bit this past week, which is why it still earns a spot here on the list, despite it dropping a number of spots. As raw averages are now $19, up 27%. Highs hitting $33, which is a 33% increase from last week. And another CGC 96 sold this week for $190, which in itself is a 31% increase on last week's 9.6 sale. No 9.8 sales these last 2 weeks, but 9.6. And with that, It's still doing well. It's still going up in value, or in price, I should say. And that's why it still earned itself a spot, albeit at the bottom of the list. Now, with that said, let's keep it rolling, get to our next book.
Number 9.
All right, news this week that we should be getting an animated series based off of Mr. Miracle has caused folks to go back to the OG original. Mr. Miracle, Jack Kirby, goodness, Jack Kirby doing the art, Jack Kirby doing the writing, the New Gods, classic book. We haven't seen this one here in a while, but it found its way back thanks to this news of an animated series coming our way. Granted, not a ton of volume on this, but albeit with about a dozen sold, that is an increase of 233% because basically no one was buying this book last week or the weeks preceding this because Mr. Miracle wasn't anything that anybody was really concerned with these days. But news hits, everybody wants to hear more about Mr. Miracle and goes back and finds the book, which is why even at a dozen sales, that's a 230% jump. Average price on raw books. A lot of these are old and graded, but the raw averages are up 25% to $65. And again, random graded sales, 9.0, the highest sale of the week at $220. This is the type of book that will sell in any grade. If it's graded, prices are going to be, contingent on those grades, but it's one of those things, just kind of ballpark it, trying to give you some sense of, how the value is kind of going up or the price is kind of going up with this news. We'll see where this goes over the weeks ahead, but OG Mr. Miracle from, 1971, I think, back up here on the list at number 9. And with that, let's keep it going and see what we got next.
Number 8.
And at number 8, off the outside looking in, I mentioned this last week on the outside looking in because of the rumored continuation of the Midnight Suns project, that they're still working on it. We're still going to be getting it. So a lot of folks still going back and grabbing this Ghost Rider 28, which is sort of a cameo of the team, even though they're not really together. It's kind of a vision of the future. For the real first meeting of them all together, it's issue 31. This sometimes sells in concert with 28 and 31 sell together. So you'll see a lot of paired up sales like that. But this storyline kind of builds out the idea of the Midnight Suns. But don't just take it at face value that this is the first appearance, because it is, but it kind of isn't. Just know what you're buying when you're buying these books. It's still a cheap one, though, so you're not going to be too concerned about what we're talking about. But with that said, from last week, this had a couple dozen sales, up 57%. Average prices are only $10, but that in itself is a 33% jump because, like I said, mostly last week, this is like a $5, $6 book at best. You can still find this in those cheap bins, dollar bins, poly bag possibly still with that poster that comes with it. There's also newsstand versions, etc. Highs hitting 15, which again is not all that high, but it's still a 22% jump from last week's high. So with that mentioned, this is a book to keep an eye on going forward, especially if we get this project. We'll see how the market decides on the 28-31 debate. But with that said, 28's doing the best right now, as there haven't been too many sales of 31 on its own, but a few 31s selling with 28 in packages, in groups or pairs, whatever you want to call it. With that said, let's get on with the list to lucky number 7.
Number 7.
And here at number 7, we have Revival number 1. Yes, this sci-fi show finally hit. I haven't had a chance to check this out yet. I will try this weekend to give it a look-see. I'm curious. I'm interested. But despite the fact that I've been trying to mention that this was coming, I think a lot of people forgot about it. Summertime, school ending, etc. People too busy. They weren't paying attention for this. But now that the show is out, they are going back and looking for the book. This is the Jenny Frison cover on cover A. There are 3 printings, I believe, of this at least. There's also a Phantom cover, little Phantom variant that you'll see that has a little Phantom logo on it that is also doing well. But basically, this book, since last week, is up in volume and price. As we're looking at a couple dozen sold, up 233%. Average price is now at $33, which is a 32% jump from last week. Highs hitting 40 raw, 38% jump from last week. And CGC 9/8 are about $150. Those Phantom variants I've been talking about, those are also right around those high prices for the raws, like 40 to 45. I saw a number of sales in that, kind of $45, $50 kind of range. So and again, the only difference is that little Phantom logo on the bottom. Just something to be mindful of when you're out there shopping and hunting, that you can get a little bit of a premium if you have that version of the book. But that all said, Revival show is out. People started looking for the book this week. Volumes and prices are up, earning its spot here at number 7. And with that, let's keep the list rolling and get to number 6.
Number 6.
All right, I was surprised to find this one here at number 6 personally. I was doing all my research on all the Venom books because Venom has been selling, but by extension, I figured, you know what? Eddie Brock's Carnage has been out for a little bit. He's also finding himself on that new Avengers team, or soon to be joining that new Avengers team. Let's take a look at what Carnage is doing. And to my surprise, I'm not the only one who's looking back into Carnage, because apparently people have been buying this book. Volumes the last couple of weeks have been about the same, with over 40 sales both weeks. Prior to that, 2 weeks ago, this was maybe selling in a couple dozen, 20 plus sales thereabouts, but over 40 sales each week the last 2 weeks. But prices are up from last week, as raw averages are now at $74, up 28%. Highs hitting $122 this week, which is again another increase of 34%, and an average price that's included graded copies as well as raw copies. So the overall average price sold for all the copies sold is up 52%, because there were a number of graded prices selling for this book. The highest of this one this week was a CGC 9/6 signature series that was signed by both Stan Lee and Mark Bagley, that sold for $900. So that was the standout sale of the week. But outside of that, across the board, a lot of these are selling for bigger prices than they were previously. So that's why this one has jumped, basically to me out of nowhere, up to number 6. Thanks to, again, Carnage. I know Carnage there's revealed some new symbiote powers apparently in the new run of Eddie Brock, where the symbiote can actually deny healing Eddie Brock, as they got to work together. Interesting stuff. That said, still not too many symbiotes for my taste. But with that all said, let's get to the top half of the list and see what we got next.
Number 5.
At number 5, brand new this week, probably my favorite cover. Granted, I'm fine with the trade dress, but the 1 in 50 incentive variant for giant size Dark Phoenix Saga number 1 by Ivan Talavera is doing well. Gorgeous cover, as you can see. Yes, it is. It catches your eye. It definitely catches your eye. Personally, I'm fine with the trade dress, but many people do want this Virgin 1 in 50, as almost 20 sold, averaging $77 out of the gate. This has only been out a couple of days, folks. Highs hitting $95 already, so almost hitting double ratio. It's not something we normally see out of high ratio incentives like 1 in 50s, 1 in 100s, but it does happen occasionally, and this seems to be one of those outliers that it's standing out from the pack. So with that said, something to keep an eye on going forward, but as of right now, tons of people picking this up after only being on the market for a couple of days. And again, I do like the cover. I admit it, but I'm also personally fine with the trade dress. But to each their own. With that said, we still got 4 more, so let's see what we got next.
Number 4.
And at number 4, we have Mr. Miracle number 1 again, but this is the Tom King series. And the reason this one is higher on the list, not only the fact that there's more volume and pricing, is because that animated series that we've been talking about is going to be guided by the writer Tom King. So we can imagine it will probably follow this run of Mr. Miracle. I'm imagining an animated adult show more in line with Harley Quinn or Kite Man. Maybe not as goofy as Kite Man, Kite Man, hell yeah, but maybe something like that is what I'm personally hoping for and envisioning for this series. But with that said, Tom King is on board to steer the ship, if you will. And this book this week, basically out of nowhere, there was one sale last week for this Mr. Miracle number 1. And this was a hot book a few years ago, but one sale last week. And then with this news, over 20 sold, averaging $18. And once again, highs hitting $28 again. CGC 9/8 are still right around $80, which is still pretty cheap for a book like this, but also something that it kind of figured. It's kind of been at that price for a while now. So 9/8 prices, we'll see what happens with those. But the average regular raw prices have kind of bounced back because, again, this is not a book that anybody was looking for prior to the news that came out this week. So with that said, we'll see how that goes going forward. But for now, Mr. Miracle number 1, that first of that 12-issue maxi series, is doing well and something to keep an eye on going forward. Second print available on this one as well. So be mindful of that when you're out there shopping. With that said, we got 3 left. Let's see what they are.
Number 3.
I mentioned this last week on the Outside Looking In to keep an eye on the regular cover A for this World to Come Marvel Knights book because of what happens inside of it. The big shock of Black Panther's son and the new Black Panther possibly to be, I figured eventually attention would turn back to the regular issue because it was only selling for cover last week. But this week, a little bit of a different story, as all those cheap copies for cover A have kind of cleared out. Granted, some of the other open order variants you can still get for that $6 cover price sort of price point. But this cover A right here, Joe Quesada cover, is starting to move ahead of that. So right now, with over 200 sales, before I stopped counting them because there's so many of them, averaging $12 these days, which is a 100% increase from, again, that cover price mark of last week. So it's now averaging about $12, with many in that $15 kind of range as of late. That's where listings are kind of lying as well, 15, 18 to 20. High hit 30 of this week, which again is a 200% increase from last week's high, which was only about $10. So last week it started to inch up. It was something I thought we should keep an eye on, and here we are. It's starting to pace itself ahead of the pack of all the other covers. With that said, most of the other covers, I should say, because we still got 2 books left. So let's see what they are.
Number 2.
And at number 2, dropping 1 spot from the list from last week, is that 1 per account cover, I should say. It's not 1 per store, but 1 per account, because some shops did get a couple of copies of this, depending on how many different distributors they order from. Don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of all that. The point is, this is the cover of choice for this book as of now. This is the, I should say again, 1 per account, Joe Quesada. We'll just call it 1 per. The 1 per black and white polybagged edition, down a spot, despite the fact that it is up across the board. It is still up across the board with over 60 sales this week, which in itself is a 20% increase. Prices up to $60 was a 100% jump from last week's $30 average. High hit $150. $150 sale on this book, which is a 150% increase over last week's high price. This book, granted, it's kind of settled in more in that $50 to $60 kind of mark on average, with an outlier higher, a little outlier lower, here and there. But point being, this is up with volume and price across the board from last week, but it's still here only at number 2 because of what we have next. And with that, let's take a look at what we have next with our top book of the week.
And our number 1.
And our number 1 book of the week is an odd one. I debated whether to even include this on the list because of my not wanting to include store exclusives. I don't include store exclusives on my Hot 10 list because I don't feel it's fair to include, and I don't want to promote one shop over another, etc. With that said, this was a little different because much like that Fandango book and much like the Milkbone thing, this is something that was kind of available to all. So with that said, this is the Giant Size X-Men number 1 GameStop foil edition. So evidently, GameStop this week released this foil edition of the book, which looked very similar to the New York Comic-Con version, but it's not exactly the same. As the Marvel logo is at the bottom right on the GameStop edition, where on, I think, the New York Comic-Con from last year, it's in the center. Otherwise, you could easily get distracted about which one you're looking at. But the GameStop one, out this week. The deal was you were supposed to buy 2 Marvel Legends, and then you would get a free copy of this book. I read stories about people just giving the books, GameStop's not even having the books, etc. So Wild West on how you get a hold of these copies from GameStop, but the market is decided they want to grab them for a premium. As, again, this is supposed to be a free book with the purchase of 2 Marvel Legends, and Marvel Legends often discounted at GameStop. But with over 70 sales, this is already averaging $52 this week, hitting a high of $100 out of the gate. So it's just one of those things I think that took a lot of people by surprise. FOMO grabbed hold, and here we are. We'll see how this goes going forward, because I'm sure that many people are already hitting up their GameStops looking for this book as of now. Don't know what the print run is, how many there could be. We'll see how many more might pop onto the market over the next 7 days and see how this goes over the next week. But for right now, this book has kind of stood out from the pack and jumped ahead of the rest of the group, which is why it earned itself that top spot. Now, with that all said, that's our list for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully you found that interesting, but don't go anywhere. Stick around for the qualified next. The boys will be back with my outside looking in, as well as all of their content and all of their segments, including a look at innovation. Remember those old innovation books? They're going to be doing a spotlight on that this week. So hang around, check out the show with the boys, and I'll see you all later with some more content. All right.